We're so pleased to welcome in Phyllis Chesler, author of the book, An American Bride in Kabul. Phyllis, we always appreciate your time, and you have written a recent editorial in which you say Europe must enact a series of changes in order to survive the threat of barbarism. One of those changes, you write, is that borders and passports must return, and no one should be allowed to travel freely from country to country throughout Europe. Tell us how this change would help.
Well, if somebody gets into Bosnia, they can just make their way to London or Paris, where they can be connected to a terrorist cell, and they can kill Jews merely for the crime of being Jews, shopping for the Sabbath, and they can kill Western journalists merely for the so-called crime of blasphemy against the prophet, which just happened. Now, France has had 20 years in which people in the streets, left-oriented people, right-oriented people, and the Muslim street have been chanting, "Death to the Jews, death to the Jews." Jewish school children have been shot down, and I'm the author, by the way, of the new Anti-Semitism, which is just out again in 2015, right now. And they have done nothing. Jews have been stabbed, they have been bombed, and the French have not called in the army, they have not called in the police. Now, the eyes of the world are on them. French perhaps begin to understand that by throwing the Jews, sacrificing their Jews, in the hope that that will appease their own hostile Muslim street, isn't exactly working. And the Jews represent democracy and the Western enterprise, which is under siege. So you want to end the European Union as a first step, because then you have to have visas to get into and out of countries and passports, which is not currently the case. And you need to have, I'm curious, will France pass legislation that will deport immediately all those who are on their no-fly lists, all those who have gone for jihadi training in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those immigrants coming in who have been trained and who are not questioned carefully enough to date at the borders of Europe. So there are a series of things not only Europe, but the United States has to do.
Phyllis, we just want to step in because our viewers may detect a bit of a difficulty with the Skype transmission, and we're working to repair that. Phyllis, of course, with a very interesting firsthand experience, getting married and being in Kabul, right, and subjected to Sharia law, more than just a cross-cultural change, a profound change in her life. And
she brings in some interesting points about France not taking action. As we talked about the other day, there's been reports that anti-Semitism has been going up 90% just from last year alone.
I think we may have restored the link now to Phyllis Chesler, joining us via Skype from New York. Phyllis, let's talk some about what France should do. Miranda just mentioned it. I asked a reporter in France about an equivalent of a U.S. Patriot Act. He said, really, the French have already tightened down. But have they, in your mind, taken steps to combat anti-Semitism that we have seen on display and heard so much about?
Absolutely not, although they're now worried about it a little bit more. The Jews were not allowed to worship last Sabbath because there wasn't proper protection in place for them after the massacre at the kosher supermarket. However, Muslims very freely worshipped in their mosques last Friday. Muslims are not under attack, and yet when the French began to now, this past week, have police and army protect some Jewish sites, Muslims complained, and they said, well, what about us? We want the same special treatment that the Jews always get. So no, I think the French are concerned that if the Jews all leave, the Semites that were friendly and productive and assimilated, if the Jews leave, that they're going to then be stuck with their no-go zones, which should be, by the way, broken up by legislative order and then by military force.
Phyllis Chesler, we do appreciate your time. You've outlined your concerns. We apologize for any disruption in Skype transmission, but as always, Phyllis, your words come through loud and clear. There is more ahead as we continue on America's Forum here on Newsmax TV.